Odyssey, Book 24. Hermes, meanwhile, was calling forth the ghosts of the suitors. He held the wand he uses to charm mortal eyes to sleep and make sleepers awake, and with this beautiful golden wand he marshaled the ghosts, who followed along, squeaking and gibbering. Bats deep inside an eerie cave flit and gibber when one of them falls from the cluster clinging to the rock overhead. So too these ghosts, as Hermes led them down the cold, dank ways, past the streams of ocean, past the white rock, past the gates of the sun and the land of dreams, until they came to the meadow of Asphodel, where the spirits of the dead dwell, phantoms of men outworn. Here was the ghost of Achilles, and those of Patroclus, of flawless Antilochus, and of Ajax, the best of the Achaeans, after Achilles, Peleus's incomparable son. These ghosts gathered around Achilles, and were joined by the ghost of Agamemnon, son of Atreus, grieving, he himself surrounded by the ghosts of those who had died with him, and met their fate in the house of Aegisthus. The son of Peleus was the first to greet him. Son of Atreus, we believed that you of all heroes were dear to thundering Zeus your whole life through, for you were lord of the great army at Troy, where we Greeks endured a bitter campaign, but you too had an early rendezvous with death, which no man can escape once he is born. How much better to have died at Troy, with all the honor you commanded there. The entire Greek army would have raised you a tomb, and you would have won glory for your son as well. As it was, you were doomed to a most pitiable death. And the ghost of Agamemnon answered, Godlike Achilles, you did have the good fortune to die in Troy, far from Argos. Around you fell some of the best Greeks and Trojans of their time, fighting for your body as you lay there in the howling dust of war. One of the great, your horsemen forgotten, we fought all day, and would never have stopped had not Zeus halted us with a great storm. Then we bore your body back to the ships, and laid it on a bier, and cleansed your beautiful flesh with warm water and ointments, and the men shed many hot tears and cut their hair. Then your mother heard, and she came from the sea with her saltwater women, and an eerie cry rose over the deep. The troops panicked, and they would have run for the ships had not a man who was wise in the old ways stopped them, Nestor, whose counsel had prevailed before. Full of concern, he called out to the troops, Argives and Achaeans, halt! This is no time to flee. It is his mother with her immortal nymphs, come from the sea to mourn her dead son. When he said that, the troops settled down. Then the daughters of the old man of the sea stood all around you and wailed piteously, and they dressed you in immortal clothing, and the muses, all nine, chanted the dirge, singing responsively in beautiful voices. You couldn't have seen a dry eye in the army, so poignant was the song of the muses. For 17 days we mourned you like that, men and gods together. On the 18th day we gave you to the fire, slaughtering sheep and horned cattle around you. You were burned in the clothing of the gods, with rich unguents and sweet honey, and many Greek heroes paraded in arms around your burning pyre, both infantry and charioteers, and the sound of their marching rose to heaven. When the fire had consumed you, we gathered your white bones at dawn, Achilles, and laid them in unmixed wine and unguents. Your mother had given us a gold urn, a gift of Dionysus, she said, made by Hephaestus. In this urn lie your white bones, Achilles, mingled with those of the dead Patroclus. Just apart lie the bones of Antilochus, whom you honored most after Patroclus died. Over them all, we spearmen of the great army heaped an immense and perfect barrow on a headland beside the broad Hellespont, so that it might be seen from far out at sea by men now and men to come. Your mother, Thetis, had collected beautiful prizes from the gods, and now set them down in the middle of the field to honor the best of the Achaean athletes. You have been to many heroes' funeral games where young men contend for prizes, but you would have marveled at the sight of the beautiful prizes silver-footed Thetis set out for you. You were very dear to the gods. Not even in death have you lost your name, Achilles, nor your honor among men. But what did I get for winding up the war? Zeus worked out for me a ghastly death at the hands of Aegisthus and my murderous wife. As these two heroes talked with each other, Quicksilver Hermes was leading down the ghosts of the suitors killed by Odysseus. When Hermes and those ghosts drew near, the two heroes were amazed and went up to see who they were. The ghost of Agamemnon recognized one of them, Amphimedon, who had been his host in Ithaca, and called out, Amphimedon, why have you come down beneath the dark earth, you and your company, all men of rank, all the same age? It's as if someone had hand-picked the city's best men. Did Poseidon sink your ships and drown you in the wind-whipped waves? Was it that, or did an enemy destroy you on land as you cut off their cattle and flocks of sheep, or as they fought for their city and women? Tell me. Remember who is asking, an old friend of your house. I came there with godlike Menelaus to urge Odysseus to sail with the fleet to Ilion. A full month that journey to Ithaca took us, hard work, persuading Odysseus, destroyer of cities. The ghost of Amphimedon responded, Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, I remember all that, just as you tell it. And I will tell you exactly what happened to us, and how it ended in our bitter death. We were courting the wife of Odysseus, long gone by then. She loathed the thought of remarrying, but she wouldn't give us a yes or no. Her mind was bent on death and darkness for us. Here is one of the tricks she dreamed up. She set up a loom in the hall and started weaving, a huge, fine, threaded piece, and then came out and said, Young men, my suitors, since Odysseus is dead, eager as you are to marry me, you must wait until I finish this robe. It would be a shame to waste my spinning, a shroud for the hero Laertes, when death's doom lays him low. I fear the Achaean women would reproach me if he should lie shroudless for all his wealth. We went along with this appeal to our honor. Every day she would weave at the great loom, and every night she would unweave by torchlight. She fooled us for 3 years with her craft, but in the 4th year, as the seasons rolled by, and the moons waned, and the days dragged on, one of her women, who knew all about it, told us, and we caught her unweaving the gloried shroud. Then we forced her to finish it. When it was done, she washed it and showed it to us, and it shone like the sun or the moon. It was then that some evil spirit brought Odysseus from who knows where to the border of his land, where the swineherd lived. Odysseus' son put in from Pylos in his black ship and joined him. These two, after they had plotted an ugly death for the suitors, came up to the town, first Telemachus and then later Odysseus, led by the swineherd, who brought his master wearing tattered clothes, looking for all the world like a miserable old beggar, leaning on a staff, his rags hanging off him. None of us could know who he was, not even the older men, when he showed up like that. We threw things at him and gave him a hard time. He just took it, pelted and taunted in his own house, until, prompted by Zeus, he and Telemachus removed all the weapons from the hall and locked them away in a storeroom. Then he showed all his cunning. He told his wife to set before the suitors his bow and gray iron implements for a contest, and for our ill-fated death. None of us were able to string that bow. We couldn't even come close. When it came round to Odysseus, we cried out and objected. Don't give the bow to that beggar, no matter what he says. Telemachus alone urged him on and encouraged him to take it, and he did. The great Odysseus took the bow, strung it easily, and shot an arrow straight through the iron. Then he stood on the threshold, poured the arrows out, and glaring around him, he shot Lord Antinous. And then he shot others, with perfect aim, and we fell thick and fast. You could see that some god was helping them, the way they raged through the hall, cutting us down right and left, and you could hear the hideous groans of men as their heads were bashed in. The floor smoked with blood. That's how we died, Agamemnon. Our bodies still lie uncared for in Odysseus' halls. Word has not yet reached our friends and family, who could wash the black blood from our wounds and lay us out with wailing, as is due the dead. And the ghost of Agamemnon responded, Well done, Odysseus, Laertes' wily son. You won a wife of great character in Icarius' daughter. What a mind she has, a woman beyond reproach. How well Penelope kept in her heart her husband Odysseus. And so her virtue's fame will never perish, and the gods will make among men on earth a song of praise for steadfast Penelope. But Tyndareus' daughter was evil to the core, killing her own husband, and her song will be a song of scorn, bringing ill repute to all women, even the virtuous. That was the drift of their talk as they stood in the Dark Lord's halls, deep under the earth. Odysseus and the others went from the town and made good time, getting down to Laertes' well-kept fields. The old man had worked hard, reclaiming the land from the wilderness. His farmhouse was there with a row of huts around it, where the field hands ate and rested and slept. These were his slaves, and they did as he wished. There was an old Sicilian woman, too, who took good care of the old man out in the country. Odysseus had a word with the herdsman and his son. Go into the farmhouse and make yourselves busy. Sacrifice the best pig and roast it for dinner. I'm going to test my father. Will he recognize me? Will he know who I am after all these years? He disarmed and gave his weapons to the herdsmen. They hurried off indoors, leaving Odysseus to search through the rows of fruit trees and vines. He did not find Dolius or any of his sons anywhere in the orchard. Old Dolius had taken them to gather field stones for a garden wall, but he found his father alone on a well-banked plot, spading a plant. He had an old, dirty shirt, mended and patched, and leather leggings pieced together as protection from scratches. He wore gloves because of the bushes, and on his head he had a goatskin cap crowning his sorrow. Odysseus, who had borne much, saw him like this, worn with age and a grieving heart, and wept as he watched from a pear tree's shade. He thought it over. Should he just throw his arms around his father, kiss him, and tell him all he had done, and how he'd return to his homeland again? Or should he question him and feel him out first? Better that way, he thought, to feel him out first with a few pointed remarks. With this in mind, godlike Odysseus walked up to his father, who kept his head down and went on digging. His illustrious son stood close by him and said, "Well, old-timer, you certainly know how to garden. There's not a plant, a fig tree, a vine, or an olive, not a pear tree or leek in this whole garden untended. But, if I may say so without getting you angry, you don't take such good care of yourself. Old age is hard, yes, but unwashed, scruffy, and dressed in rags, it can't be that your lord is too lax to care for you. And anyway, there's nothing in your build or looks to suggest you're a slave. You look more like a king, the sort of man who, after he has bathed and eaten, sleeps on a soft bed, as is only right for elders. Come on now and give me a straight answer. Whose slave are you? Whose orchard is this? And tell me this, too, so that I can be sure. Is this really Ithaca I've come to, as I was told by that man I ran into on my way over here? He wasn't very polite, couldn't be bothered to tell me what I wanted, or even to hear me out. I've been trying to find out about an old friend I entertained at my house once, whether he's still alive or is dead by now and gone down to Hades. So I'll ask you if you'll give me your attention. I was host to a man once back in my own country, a man who means more to me than anyone else who has ever visited me from abroad. He claimed his family was from Ithaca, and he said his father was Laertes, son of Archesius. I took him into my home and entertained him in a style befitting the wealth in my house, and gave him suitable gifts to seal our friendship. 7 ingots of fine gold, a silver mixing bowl embossed with flowers, 12 cloaks, as many carpets, mantles and tunics, and his choice of 4 beautiful women superbly trained in handicrafts. A tear wet his father's cheek as he answered, "You've come to the land you're looking for, a stranger, but it's in the hands of haughty and violent men. You've given all those generous gifts in vain. If you were to find him alive here in Ithaca, he would send you off with the beautiful gifts and fine hospitality you deserve as his friend. But tell me this now, and tell me the truth. How many years has it been since you hosted your ill-fated guest, my son, if ever I had a son? Born for sorrow he was, and now far from home, far from his loved ones. His bones are picked clean by fish undersea, or on some wild shore his body is feeding the scavenger birds, unburied, unmourned by his mother and me, who brought him into this world. Nor has his wife Penelope, patient and wise, who brought him so much, lamented her husband on a funeral bier, or closed his eyelids, as is due the dead. And tell me this too, so that I will know. Who are you? What city are you from? Who are your parents? And where have you moored the sailing ship that brought you and your crew of heroes here? Or did you come as a passenger on another ship that put you ashore and went on its way?" And Odysseus, his great mind teeming, "I'll tell you everything point by point. I come from Albus, and have made my home there. I'm the son of Apheidas and Polypaemon's grandson. My name is Eperitus. Some storm spirit drove me off course from Sicily, and as luck had it, here. My ship stands off wild country far from the town. As for Odysseus, it's been 5 years now since he left my land, ill-fated maybe, but the birds were good when he sailed out, on the right. This cheered me as I sent him off, and he was cheered too, our hearts full of hope. We would meet again and exchange splendid gifts. A black mist of pain shrouded Laertes. He scooped up fistfuls of shimmering dust and groaned as he poured it upon his gray head. This wrung Odysseus's heart, and bitter longing stung his nostrils as he watched his father. With a bound he embraced him, kissed him, and said, "I'm the one that you miss, father, right here, back in my homeland after 20 years. But don't cry now, hold back your tears. I'm telling you, we really have to hurry. I've killed the suitors in our house and avenged all the wrongs that have grieved your heart." But Laertes' voice rang out in answer. If you are really Odysseus and my son come back, give me a sign, a clear sign I can trust. And Odysseus, the master strategist, first, here's the scar I got on Parnassus from that boar's bright tusk. Mother and you had sent me to my grandfather Autolycus to collect some presents he had promised me when he had visited us there. And let me count off all the trees in the orchard rows you gave me one day when I was still a boy. You gave me 13 pear trees, 10 apple trees, 40 fig trees, and 50 vine rows that ripened one by one as the season went on, with heavy clusters of all sorts of grapes. He spoke, and the old man's knees went slack as he recognized the signs Odysseus showed him. He threw his arms around his beloved son and gasped for breath, and godly Odysseus, who had borne much, embraced him. When he had caught his breath and his spirit returned, Laertes' voice rang out to the sky. Father Zeus, there are still gods on high Olympus, if the suitors have really paid the price. But now I have a terrible fear that all of Ithaca will be upon us soon, and word will have gone out to Cephallenia too. And Odysseus, his mind teeming. We don't have to worry about that right now. Let's go to the cottage near the orchard. I sent Telemachus there and the cowherd and swineherd to prepare a meal for us. And they went together to the house with its comfortable rooms and found Telemachus and 2 herdsmen there, carving huge roasts and mixing wine. While they were busy with these tasks, the old Sicilian woman bathed great Laertes in his own house and rubbed him down with olive oil and threw about his shoulders a handsome cloak. And Athena came and made the shepherd of the people taller than before and added muscle to his frame. When he came from the bath, his son marveled at his deathless, godlike appearance, and his words rose to his father on wings. Father, surely one of the gods eternal has made you larger and more handsome too. And Laertes, feeling the magic, answered him, I wish by Zeus and Athena and Apollo that I could have stood at your side yesterday in our house, armor on my shoulders, as the man I was when I took Nericus, the mainland town commanding the Cephallenians. I would have beaten the daylights out of them, there in our halls, and made your heart proud. While they were talking, the others had finished preparing the meal. They all sat down on benches and chairs, and were just serving themselves food, when old Dolius came in with his sons, weary from their work in the fields. Their mother, the old Sicilian woman, had gone out to call them. It was she who made their meals and took care of Dolius, and now that old age had set in. When they saw Odysseus and realized who he was, they stood there dumbfounded. Odysseus spoke to them gently and said, Old man, sit down to dinner, and all of you. You can stop being amazed. Hungry as we are, we've been waiting a long time for you. He spoke, and Dolius ran up to him with arms outstretched and clasped Odysseus' hand and kissed him on the wrist, trembling with excitement. The old man said, My dear Odysseus, you have come back home. We missed you so much, but never hoped to see you again. The gods themselves have brought you back. Welcome, welcome, and may the gods grant you happiness. But tell me this, I have to know. Does Penelope know that you have returned, or should we send her a messenger? And Odysseus, his mind teeming. She knows, old man. You don't have to worry. He spoke, and Dolius sat down in a polished chair. His sons then gathered around glorious Odysseus and greeted him and clasped his hands, and then sat down in order next to their father. While they were busy with their meal, Rumor, that swift messenger, flew all through the city, telling everyone about the grim fate the Sooners had met. Before long, a crowd had gathered outside Odysseus' palace, and the sound of their lamentation hung in the air. They carried their dead out of the hall and buried them. Those from other cities they put aboard ships to be brought home by sea. Then they all went to the meeting place, sad at heart. When they were assembled, Eupeithes rose and spoke among them, upon his heart an unbearable grief for his son Antinous, the first man whom Odysseus killed. Weeping for him, he addressed the assembly and said, My friends, it is truly monstrous what this man has done to our city. First, he sailed off with many of our finest men and lost the ships and every man aboard. Now he has come back and killed many others, by far the best of the Cephallenians. We must act now before he runs off to Pylos or takes refuge with the Epean lords of Elis. We will be disgraced forever if we don't avenge our sons' and brothers' deaths. And if we don't, I see no point in living. I'd rather be dead. Let's move now, before they cross the sea. He wept as he spoke, and they all pitied him. Then up came Medon and the godlike bard, Phemius, from Odysseus' halls. They had just woken up from a long sleep, and now stood in the midst of the wondering crowd. Medon had this to say, Hear me, men of Ithaca. It was not without the will of the deathless gods that Odysseus managed this. I myself saw one of the immortals close to Odysseus. He looked just like Mentor, but was a god, now appearing in front of Odysseus, urging him on, then raging through the hall, terrifying the suitors who fell thick and fast. He spoke, and they all turned pale with fear. Then the old hero Halitherses, son of Mastor, rose to speak. He alone looked ahead and behind, and spoke with the best of intentions to them. Now hear what I have to say, men of Ithaca. You have only yourselves to blame, my friends, for what has happened. You would not obey me, nor Mentor, shepherd of the people, when we told you to make your sons stop their foolishness. It was what your sons did that was truly monstrous, wasting the wealth and dishonoring the wife of a great man, who they said would never return. Now listen to me and keep your peace. Some of you are asking for trouble, and you just might find it. Less than half of them took his advice and stayed in their seats. Most of them jumped up with a whoop and went with Eupeithes. They rushed to get weapons, and when the mob had armed themselves in glowing bronze, they put the city behind them, following Eupeithes, who in his folly thought he would avenge his son's death, but met his own fate instead. Eupeithes would never return home again. Athena, meanwhile, was having a word with Zeus. Father of us all, son of Cronos Most High, tell me what is hidden in that mind of yours. Will you let this grim struggle go on, or will you establish peace on Ithaca? And Zeus in his thunderhead responded, Why question me, daughter? Wasn't this your plan to have Odysseus pay them back with a vengeance? Do as you will, but I will tell you what would be fitting. Now that Odysseus has paid the suitors back, let all parties swear a solemn oath that he will be king on Ithaca all of his days. We, for our part, will have them forget the killing of their sons and brothers. Let them live in friendship as before, and let peace and prosperity abound. This was all Athena needed to hear, and she streaked down from Olympus's peaks. The meal was over. Seeing that his company had satisfied their hunger, Odysseus said, Someone should go out to see if they're coming. One of Dolius's sons went to the doorway, looked out, and saw the mob closing in. His words flew fast to Odysseus. They're almost here. We'd better arm quickly. They jumped up and put on their gear. Odysseus and his 3 men and Dolius's 6 sons, Laertes and Dolius, armed themselves too, warriors in a pinch despite their white hair. When they had strapped on their bronze, they opened the doors and headed out behind Odysseus. Athena joined them, looking for all the world like Mentor, and Odysseus was glad to see her. He turned to his son Telemachus and said, Telemachus, now you will see firsthand what it means to distinguish yourself in war. Don't shame your ancestors. We have been strong and brave in every generation. And Telemachus coolly answered him, The way I feel now, I don't think you'll see me shaming my ancestors, as you put it, father. Laertes was delighted with this and exclaimed, What a day, dear gods, my son and grandson going head to head to see who is best. The gray-eyed one stood next to him and said, Son of Arcesius, my dearest comrade, say a prayer to Zeus and his gray-eyed daughter, and then cast your long-shadowed spear. Pallas Athena breathed great strength into him, and with a prayer to Zeus' gray-eyed daughter, Laertes cast his long-shadowed spear and hit Eupeithes square in the helmet. Bronze bored through bronze, and Eupeithes thudded to the ground, his armor clattering. Odysseus and his glorious son charged the front lines, thrusting hard with their swords and spears. They would have killed every last man, not one would have been home, had not Athena, daughter of the storm cloud, given voice to a cry that stopped them all cold. Ithacans, lay down your arms now, and go your ways with no more bloodshed. Thus Athena, and they turned pale with fear. The weapons dropped from their trembling hands and fell to the ground as the goddess's voice sent shock waves through them. They turned backward toward the city and ran for their lives. With a roar, the great long-suffering Odysseus gathered himself and swept after them, like a soaring raptor. At that moment, Zeus, son of Cronos, hurled down a flaming thunderbolt that landed at the feet of his owl-eyed daughter, who said, Son of Laertes in the line of Zeus, cunning Odysseus, restrain yourself. End this quarrel, and cease from fighting. Let broad-browed Zeus frown upon you. Thus Athena, the man obeyed and was glad, and the goddess made both sides swear binding oaths. Pallas Athena, daughter of the storm cloud, who looked like Mentor and spoke with his voice.